Ella, my once loyal wife who turned out to be a cheating backstabber, is now my boss. The irony is almost too much to handle. I should have seen it coming, but I was just so relieved to be free from that toxic marriage. Now, it's like the nightmare has returned with a vengeance. Ella used to taunt me, saying I was a heart attack waiting to happen, and unfortunately she was right. My doctor had warned me, but I shrugged it off, thinking my sacrifices for the family were worth the risk. Ella always had a taste for the finer things, our mansion, the pool, even an unused country club membership. I believed it was my duty to provide all these luxuries. The woman who shattered my heart is now controlling my career. This realization jolted me out of my complacency. I couldn't bear to work under her, not after discovering her multiple affairs. So, I gathered my belongings, wrote my resignation letter, and walked out of the office for the final time, leaving the letter, my phone, car keys, and credit card on Sophie's desk. It's been a pleasure working with you, Sophie. I wish you all the best. You're an invaluable employee, and I appreciate everything you've done. Take care and don't let Ella push you around. If she tries, use my departure as leverage to get fair treatment. You're really leaving, Mark? This isn't just a bluff, she asked, holding my resignation letter. Yes, Sophie. I can't work for someone I don't respect. With everything she's done, she's beyond redemption in my eyes. I'll miss you, Mark. Ella's going to be livid when she finds out. She's been badgering me about your workload. I didn't say anything, but I felt like I was betraying you. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I smiled. Don't worry about it. You have to look out for yourself. Nothing you could have said would have changed my mind. I knew it was over when the merger memo came out. I have no secrets here, as you know. What should I say when she asks where you are? Tell her the truth. She won't be able to twist it. Do what she wants as long as it doesn't compromise your values. It was my pleasure, dear. I'll stay in touch, I said, shaking her hand and giving it a light kiss. As I was getting into my car, a black limousine pulled up at the office. Ella stepped out with two well-dressed men, looking every bit the high-status businesswoman. We all knew she was just a well-paid escort with a title. She looked professional in her business suit, but she always knew how to dress to impress. She didn't notice me, which was just as well. I waited a few minutes for her to go inside before driving away from the parking lot for the last time. I had wrapped up my affairs, sold what I could, and put everything else in storage. My doctor had advised me to seek a change of scenery, and I finally took his advice. I spent the next 3 months traveling, sightseeing, and decompressing from work stress. Eventually, I ended up in a quaint little town with a mild climate, friendly folks, and fantastic fishing. I rented a cozy 3-bedroom cottage with a workshop by the lake with the option to buy. It had everything I needed for a fresh start. Sitting on the back porch, sipping a cold drink, I couldn't help but wonder how Ella reacted to my abrupt departure. I decided to call Sophie the next day to find out. Hey, Sophie, it's Mark. How's everything over there? Mark, it's so good to hear from you. I was beginning to worry you had vanished. I laughed. Not quite vanished, but the view here is stunning. Wish you were here. How's everything there? Mark, you sure know how to shake things up. Ella has been on a rampage, laying people off left and right. David Lawson quit last week after she relegated him to a windowless basement office. He couldn't stand it and resigned. I'm sorry to hear that. David was one of the best. What is Ella thinking? She's going to ruin everything. How is she treating you? Sophie chuckled. She's frustrated. She tried to fire me because I let you go without her talking to you first. I told her she could try to fire me, but I'd take her and the company to court. I reminded her of what you said, and she backed off, realizing her actions could backfire. So now, I'm the secretary to the demanding executive VP of operations. I guess it's about keeping your enemies closer. I told her I wanted a substantial pay raise with the promotion. She wasn't happy but just grinned in the end. I got what I wanted. Sophie filled me in on the latest office gossip. I was glad my departure had thrown a wrench into Ella's plans. I changed my life for my own well-being, and Ella's presence pushed me to stop procrastinating. This was just a bonus. However, I worried it might negatively affect everyone else, which wasn't my intention. The next morning, I ran out of sugar and decided to visit a nearby store. Their lot bordered mine with an open paddock in between. As I left the store, I almost collided with a young couple. After apologizing, I noticed a stressed woman in her early 20s behind the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked as the baby started whimpering and a couple of cars pulled up to the gas pumps. She sighed. "Where is Rachel when I need her?" I smiled and said, "Can I help? I'm Mark and I live nearby. It looks like the baby needs attention and I just need some sugar. I can help out until you're done or until Rachel arrives. Why don't I handle the customers while you take care of your baby?" She smiled back. "I'm Isabelle, and I'd be very grateful for your help, Mark." I took care of the travelers while they filled their tanks, washing windshields and chatting with them. After collecting their payments, I returned to the store, where another customer had just walked in. I went over to chat with him. "What can I do for you, sir?" "Just looking at your fishing rods," he replied. "I'm on a business trip, and my car's in for repairs. It'll take all day, so I thought I'd do some fishing to pass the time." He looked like a businessman, much like I was a year ago. Seeing he was about to buy cheap gear, I asked, "Do you fish often?" He shook his head. "Not really, but I'd like to if I had time." I smiled and convinced him that investing in better equipment would increase his chances of catching fish and enjoying his time. I then helped a dozen other customers before Isabelle finished settling her daughter. "Thank you so much, Mark. Why does it always get busy when you least expect it? Lily doesn't usually fuss, and Rachel is always here by this time." I grinned. "To explain it, I'd need to understand quantum mechanics, which I don't. Maybe you need more reliable help." Isabelle's face fell, and I quickly apologized, realizing I had upset her. With sad eyes and a tear forming, she nodded. "Mark, it's not your fault, but I'm a widow," Isabelle said, her voice trembling. She told me about her husband Henry, an Army reservist who died in a training accident when his truck flipped over. He never got to know he was going to be a father. Lily was likely conceived the night before he left. With tears in her eyes, Isabelle added, "He would have been an amazing father. He had so many dreams, and this store was one of them," she said, gesturing around. Over the next few weeks, I found myself helping out at the store more and more. I know what you're thinking, and you're probably right. Isabelle was incredibly attractive, and it had been a while since I felt anything. But more importantly, it was about regaining my sense of worth. Ella's betrayal had left me feeling useless and inadequate. Isabelle seemed to understand my need to be helpful. She never directly asked for my assistance, but always appreciated it. Spending time with her felt good. She was kind, fun, and grateful. Exactly what I needed. One evening, as I was heading home from the store, my phone rang, breaking my thoughts. "Hi, Mark. Lucky for you, you're not a secretary. Your phone manners are terrible," a familiar voice teased. "Hi, Sophie. You caught me off guard. It's almost 7 p.m. Is something wrong?" Sophie's tone shifted. "I waited until I got home to call because I think my work phone is tapped. Mark, you need to be careful. Ella hired a private investigator to follow you. She asked me to arrange it, and I couldn't refuse without risking my job. But I wanted to warn you so you could be cautious." I sighed heavily. "Is she trying to scare me to death?" "I don't know, Mark. She's stressed, working long hours to turn things around. She looks older and has put on weight. She's probably not pregnant, but it's stress and comfort eating. She's frantic to find you and blames me for letting you go without talking to her." Good grief. Ignoring her isn't working. Here's an idea. In a week, give her a fake report saying the investigator couldn't find me, but confirm my phone is active. Tell her you convinced me to talk to her. Sophie sounded unsure. "Are you sure, Mark? This feels wrong." "Don't worry, Sophie. Take care of yourself first. I appreciate your help, but don't put yourself at risk." A week later, Sophie texted, "PH02, BB2 day, be ready for call today sometime." I chuckled at the acronyms. BB stood for bad boss. Damn these young folks and their tech. I wondered what I'd say to Ella, but decided to wing it. As expected, the call came. I answered Ella's number. "Yes, Ella, what do you want?" She seemed startled by my bluntness. "What's that cow my secretary been up to?" I hung up. The phone rang again. "Damn it, Mark!" I hung up once more. The next call came from Sophie. "Are you going to talk to her or not?" she asked quickly. I grinned. "Tell her to be polite next time, and she might get more than 2 words out of me. I'm tired of her attitude." Sophie chuckled. "Will do, Mark. Talk to you later." 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. "Mark." "Yes, Ella, what do you want?" There was a pause. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I'm listening. Another pause. Sophie cried on your shoulder. What did she say? Sophie is very capable. It doesn't matter what she told me. Your so-called secretary is the only reason you're talking to me now. You should be grateful to her. So what do you want? I heard a sigh. I'm sorry, Mark. I've been cranky lately. I know Sophie is doing a good job and I appreciate it. Ella was trying to calm my irritation, but I wasn't buying it. Get to the point, Ella. What do you want? I heard Ella suppress a sob. I really need your advice, Mark. I thought we would work together as a team, but you quit and disappeared before I could explain. I snickered. I saw the writing on the wall, Ella. When your company bought mine, I didn't see the point in staying to be humiliated again. Have a nice life, Ella. Goodbye. No, please, Mark. I need to talk to you in person, not over the phone. Just give me 30 minutes to pitch my idea. I'm begging you. I don't know who else to turn to. I gritted my teeth, wanting to hang up and forget her. After a long pause, I finally said, Okay, Ella, but I'm not chasing you. You come to my place. I'll arrange it with Sophie and she'll let you know when and where. I hung up before she could respond, half expecting her to call back, but the phone stayed silent all night. Ella was annoyed. Why do I have to go through Sophie? Why can't you just give me Mark's address so I can go alone? Sophie gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Ella, this is what Mark wants. He doesn't want to see you. In his words, my way or the highway. I don't enjoy sitting in the car with you for hours either, but if he wants me to bring you, you'll have to deal with it. I won't be there for your conversation, though. I'll make myself scarce. I started chopping vegetables for the Italian sauce I was making for dinner. Sophie had called 30 minutes ago to let me know they'd arrive soon, which meant they'd be here in about 20 minutes. I wanted Ella to feel uncomfortable, so I kept busy to put her at a disadvantage. 15 minutes later, I heard a knock. It's open. Come in. Well, don't you look completely at home, Sophie remarked with a genuine smile. I chuckled. Hi, Sophie. Good to see you too. You look good. I saw Ella standing behind her looking nervous. Ella. That was all I said, but I noticed her tired eyes and weight gain. Sophie's estimate of 10 pounds might have been harsh, but not too far off. I could use a drink, Sophie said, giving me a friendly hug and a kiss on the cheek. The country air suits you. You look great. There's wine, beer, or Coke in the fridge, I replied, holding up my grubby hands. Want something to drink? I glanced at Ella. Ella noticed my cold tone and lowered her head, realizing this meeting would be tough. Hi, Mark. Wine would be nice. Sophie's right. You look good. Sophie opened a bottle of white wine, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to Ella. Which way to the view? She asked, waving the wine bottle. I'll leave you two alone, remember, she pointed the bottle at me. I'm not here to clean up a crime scene, so behave. I smiled and pointed to the back door. Don't worry about me. There's a fishing rod on the deck if you want to try it out. Sophie rolled her eyes. Not likely. I wouldn't know what to do with a fish even if I caught one, she said, as she slipped out the door, leaving Ella and me alone. Take a seat and tell me why you're here. I pointed to a chair and continued chopping herbs. Ella hesitated but then sat down, trying to break the ice. Nice place you have here. Cozy but nice. I tensed, my irritation clearly visible. This isn't a social visit, Ella, I said, focusing on the basil. Just get to the point so we can move on. Ella sighed and took a sip of wine. Can I ask one question? Go ahead, Ella. Doesn't mean I'll answer, but ask. Why did you leave? She asked, her eyes searching mine, knowing my temper. I put down the knife and faced her. You don't need a degree to figure that out, Ella. You're a vice president now. Surely you can use your brain to understand why. Ella looked annoyed. That's a low blow, even for you, Mark. I'm good at my job, but I'm not a mind reader. I folded my arms and stared at her. Ella seemed to shrink under my gaze. You're right, Ella. You're not a mind reader, and few people are. But in your position, you need to understand people and their motives. A good manager uses their team's strengths for the company's benefit. It's a win-win. Do you really want to know what I think of you and your skills? She shivered at my question, expecting an unpleasant answer, but she straightened her shoulders. Okay, Mark, what do you think of my corporate skills? I almost laughed at her weak attempt at bravery and turned back to cooking. You're a bulldozer, Ella. You have the finesse of a wrecking ball. Her jaw dropped. A bulldozer? Care to elaborate? I smiled inwardly as I continued chopping. Yes, Ella, a bulldozer. You plow straight ahead without considering the consequences or analyzing the situation. You don't think about who you can help or who can help you. You just charge ahead, ignoring anyone in your path. That's why you're in your current unenviable position. You've burned bridges and missed opportunities. I saw a tear in her eye. She seemed lost. No, I don't want to believe that, she said softly. Everything I did was for us, but your ego got in the way. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. If you had stayed, I could have explained my plan. You still haven't told me why you left. I tasted the sauce and added more salt. I saw the writing on the wall, Ella. I know you're here to cut the deadwood. You're the person sent to remove those who needed to go for the company to progress. I agree it was necessary. I just made it easier for you to make those decisions. I saw the anticipation in her eyes. This was the conversation she wanted. Mark Thompson, for a smart man, you sure do some stupid things. I had no intention of firing you. If you were smart, you'd know that everything I did was for us to make your dreams come true. That's quite a performance, Ella. It tugs at my heartstrings and strokes my ego, but I never said you weren't good at manipulation. I remember countless times we sat in the kitchen, talking about how the fools at the top were ruining the company. I believed in you, Mark. I believed you could get the company back on its feet. Now I have the chance to help you turn your ideas into reality. I worked hard to give you that chance, telling my bosses I could make your company profitable. And what did that get me? Oh, here it comes, the "it's all your fault" routine. You left me to face the consequences without hearing me out. I keep fighting, working long hours on what you said could be done. All I need is a little help from the one man I've ever loved. It's you, Mark. We can sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor. I love you, and this is our future. I'm not naive enough to think we'll get back together, though I dream about it. But I see now that we can have a good business relationship and be happy. So what do you say? How about we call a truce, start working together, and show them we're a force to be reckoned with? Ella took another sip of wine and leaned back, her fervor fading. She had made her point, and now it was up to me. While she talked, I finished the sauce and put water on to boil for the spaghetti. Julius Caesar's last words, "Et tu, brute," came to mind. Betrayal was my first thought when I found out about her actions. Despite everything, Ella was still very attractive. But one thought kept me grounded, reminding me of her past and present actions. Good managers, Ella, consider all aspects before deciding. Let's say I buy into your brilliant plan. Why do you think I can help you? Ella's eyes flashed with frustration. I've told you, I believe you can do it. You have the credibility within the company to get the employees' support. They trust and respect you. Your obstacles were with upper management, and my position as VP has removed them. I smiled sadly at her naivety. You don't see that your very presence as VP undermines my ability to gain support, but I'm not surprised you refuse to believe you've done anything wrong. Others see it differently, Ella. I saw the concern on Ella's face as I continued. Have you ever wondered why you struggle to gain support for your ideas? The rumor mill has done a thorough job informing everyone about your business practices and ethics, and none of it came from me. Ella's face froze. I was treading into territory she wanted to avoid. People see you as someone who slept her way to the top, leaving more deserving employees behind. They know about our failed marriage and how I kept my dignity and their respect by divorcing you. If I accepted your offer, it would signal that everything you did was acceptable. I'd go from a wronged husband to a disgraced employee, losing their respect and my effectiveness. Tears welled up in Ella's eyes as my words hit home. Her confidence was crumbling. I don't believe you, Mark. I've shown I'm willing to work hard. I took a powerful position to get the job done. I'm capable, or Brian wouldn't have given me the job. I shook my head, my anger turning to sadness. Ella truly believed her own narrative, perhaps out of self-preservation. Did Brian approach you with the takeover offer, or did you push him? Ella wiped her face with a tissue from her purse and straightened up. It doesn't matter what you or anyone else thinks. I'm not Brian's puppet. I approached him, and he put up a lot of barriers before letting me present my proposal to the board. I nodded. Just as I thought. Did Brian entertain you when he finally let you speak to the board? Her sigh gave her away. Trying to gather her thoughts, she asked, "Why do you think that?" I grinned. Do you know why I was good at my job, Ella? I've always made profiles of everyone I meet, including you. My mistake was trusting you unconditionally because I loved you. That cost me dearly, so I adjusted your profile. As my grandfather said, there's no point in getting older if you're not getting smarter. I assess people by their words and actions to see if they fit their profile. Knowing Brian, I doubt he cares if you succeed. If you fail, he'll blame the board for approving your proposal. I saw a glimmer of realization in her eyes as I continued. If you succeed, Brian gets the credit for bringing in a promising executive. If you fail, he'll just point fingers at the board. Brian doesn't care if you're smart enough or foolish enough to think you can pull this off. As long as you keep him entertained, he'll be satisfied. You're on your own, Ella. A small fish in a big pond full of hungry piranhas. Ella clutched the napkin tightly. Everything I'd said was true, and she seemed frightened by the reality of her situation. But she still tried to deny it. So you don't think I can do it? Ella's voice was barely more than a whisper, trying to mask her trembling. I shrugged nonchalantly. No, Ella, I'm certain you can't. I saw the fury ignite in her eyes but pushed forward. It would take an extraordinary effort, like launching a rocket to the moon, to shift you out of your VP position and into the corporate wilderness. What happens to your precious security then? I turned away to keep my composure. From what I've heard, you've created nothing but turmoil, making it nearly impossible for others to do their jobs. I wouldn't be shocked if the next shareholders' meeting announces a massive drop in profits, but that's just conjecture. Regardless of how you frame it, it all boils down to your reasons for doing this. You claimed you loved me and did it for us. Ella flinched but nodded. But in truth, it's all about your security, not ours. If you really loved me, you would have stopped me from working myself to death. You called me a heart attack waiting to happen. You didn't try to stop me, or if you did, it wasn't convincing. You just waited for me to collapse. You could have threatened divorce to make me reconsider. Your infidelity made me realize a lot, and that's why I'm here now, feeling great. I love you, Mark. I never wanted a divorce, Ella pleaded. You didn't want one either, but you were willing to let me work myself into the grave. Does that sound like love? I finished with a bitter edge. Ella couldn't look at me. I didn't mean what I said then, and I still love you. I regret so much of what I said, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I sighed, my face reflecting disbelief. I'm sure you believe what you're saying, Ella, but that doesn't change our reality. Don't you see? I can't trust you anymore, either personally or professionally. This discussion is over. You've made it to the top, so you'll have to wait for Brian to step down or vanish before you can aim for CEO. You think now is the perfect time to cement your position and reach for that role. Ella tried to interject, but I cut her off. Your plan is obvious. Take over my old firm and get me to work hard for your benefit again. I'm astonished you expected me to fall in line after I kicked you out. Maybe it's my fault for setting you up to fail. I saw Ella struggling to maintain her composure. One moment I blamed you, the next I was taking responsibility. You're twisting things, Mark. You're the one with it all backwards, she retorted. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. You've heard the phrase, cruel to be kind? Well, I wasn't being kind. I led you on, and then had to cut you off harshly. I went to Brian and made him uphold his promise to make you a VP. I didn't want to see you suffer, even though you deserved it. I made a mistake by making you think there was a chance I'd take you back. Your love notes on my birthday, Christmas, and other occasions showed that. I checked the sauce and added water to the nearly dry pot. If I had done what I should have, you'd have disappeared to some unknown place to start over. That's what I want you to do now. Walk away and start over. Tears streamed down her face. You might have to go back to a secretarial job, but it won't be as bad as staying and fighting. You'll be lucky if you're allowed to lick stamps while some post office manager entertains you. I watched as my words sank in. Her defiance, not humility, made me sad. I know I hurt you, Mark. I berate myself every day for it. But what you said is just cruel. You don't believe in me, yet I believe in you. Well, if that's how you feel, watch and I'll show you how it's done. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Come in, I said irritably. Is everything okay, Mark? I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, Isabelle asked, peeking in. I sighed, realizing I had lost my temper. I'm sorry, Isabelle. Please don't come in. Ella was just leaving. I glared at Ella, waiting for her to get up. Ella looked at Isabelle standing in the doorway. She was younger, maybe by 5 or 10 years, and very pretty with long, flowing dark blonde hair. Ella's face showed her realization of why Isabelle was here. She turned to me, saw the food simmering on the stove, and began to cry as she understood the situation. I glanced at the dinner I was making for Isabelle and me, recognizing what Ella was thinking. "What, you thought this was for you? I told you this wasn't a social visit. Don't be upset that I invited a friend to dinner. We broke up years ago. The only reason I let you come here was to knock some sense into you." Ella stood up, head down, and rushed past Isabelle, muttering, "Tell Sophie I'll be waiting in the car." "I hope I didn't make things worse," Isabelle said, watching Ella leave. "I can go if you need to deal with this. Can I tell Rachel I don't need her as a babysitter?" "It's not your fault. I'm glad you showed up when you did." I hugged Isabelle and kissed her cheek. "You can watch the pasta for a minute. I need to tell Sophie our meeting is over, and she can take Ella home." I stepped out onto the back terrace and saw Sophie napping in the afternoon sun. Ella's words echoed in my mind. Now that she was vice president, she had removed all the obstacles blocking my ideas, and it got me thinking. "How do you like the view?" I asked. "It's just like you said, Mark. Amazing," Sophie smiled, closing her eyes. "How did it go in there? I didn't hear any fireworks." "Not well. She's not backing down. She's in the car waiting for you. Can I ask you something?" "Sure, Mark. You can ask me anything." I smiled weakly. "How do you see your future at work? How ambitious are you, Sophie?" Her eyes widened at the unusual question. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Mark, but if it's what I think, I'd like to get Ella's job first." She stood up. "I know I can do it well, but I won't compromise my values. Why do you ask?" "I think it's time to end this circus," I said determinedly. "Can you contact David Lawson and meet me in town in 3 weeks? I might have an offer for both of you." Sophie nodded. I led her back inside where she saw Isabelle at the stove. She poked me in the ribs, whispering, "Now I see why Ella ran off, you old dog." Sophie's look made me smirk. She's gorgeous and probably the final nail in Ella's coffin. Ella is out of her league. Never was in her league. I'm not even in her league. She's her wounded pride right now. I nodded, appreciating Isabelle's beauty, and she's just as lovely on the inside. Isabelle looked up as I introduced Sophie. "Nice to meet you. Mark has so many women in his life, I'm not sure he has room for me," she said hesitantly. Sophie chuckled. "Don't worry about the other women you see Mark with. He's a one-woman man, sweetheart, and from what I can tell, he's got his eye on you. Watch out, though. Mark can be a real charmer when he's interested." I wasn't sure what Sophie meant, as we hadn't been in social situations together. I felt my face redden. "I think you've said enough for one night, Sophie. It's time to leave," I said, nudging her toward the front door. She looked back with a final comment. "If you're smart, Isabelle, you won't let this guy slip away," Sophie said with a wink and a kiss on the cheek before heading out. "Be smart. I'll see you in 3 weeks." Isabelle and I moved to the back deck, sipping wine and watching the sunset over the lake. We talked about the day, and eventually I opened up about my tumultuous marriage to Ella and the fallout that followed. "You don't really want to deal with this, do you, Mark?" Isabelle asked, her eyes full of understanding. "No, I don't," I admitted, "but I have to. I can't let everyone else lose their jobs just because I took the easy way out. I have no choice." After a moment of silence, Isabelle said, "You know, Ella still cares about you." I scoffed. "Maybe she did once, but not anymore. Not after what I said to her today. I was brutally honest, but it didn't seem to matter." Isabelle smiled softly. "For all your toughness, it's obvious you care deeply about people, Mark. Even Ella. Women notice and appreciate that in a man." I didn't have an answer, so I took another sip of wine. Isabelle reached out and touched my arm. "I believe you'll do what's right for everyone." I nodded, though I felt a weight on my shoulders. "But not everyone will see it that way." "You didn't create her problems, Mark. She did. Now she has to face the consequences," Isabelle said, breaking the silence. After a few minutes, she caught me off guard with a playful question. "Speaking of consequences, when are you going to show me around your place?" Her remark was so unexpected that I stammered, What?" Isabelle chuckled. "Sophie told me not to hesitate if I wanted you. She said, 'If you're smart, Isabelle, you won't let this guy slip through your fingers.' So here I am, holding on to someone I think is worth it." So you're interested in more than just being friends? I asked, feeling like a nervous teenager, my poor history with relationships making it hard to meet her gaze. Isabelle giggled. You're blushing, Mark. My ears burned, and a sheepish grin spread across my face. You sure know how to make a guy feel awkward. I rubbed my face, trying to regain my composure. That day I walked into your store and saw you looking so defeated, I felt like a hero coming to save the day. Her smile was warm and genuine. You were my hero that day, and you still are, Isabelle said, kissing my cheek affectionately. Since then, I've relied on you. Now I understand why you've been so supportive all these months. She paused, seeing my confusion. It must have been hard when Ella made you feel unnecessary. Well, if it helps, I need you, Mark. I haven't felt this comfortable and at peace since Henry died. Yes, it's something Ella never understood, and I couldn't explain it either. Isabelle squeezed my arm. You've been so good to me, Mark, and I appreciate it. It wasn't until Sophie's encouragement that I realized I had stronger feelings for you. So, do you want to take this to the next level? Isabelle's face showed hope and sincerity. Well, if you insist, I suppose I'll have to show you around, I said with a teasing grin. Isabelle's eyes sparkled. Forget the tour. I'm more interested in the man showing it to me. We both laughed as she stood up and headed toward the door, saying, Race you to the bedroom. Later, as I entered the restaurant, I noticed David and Sophie watching me. My mood must have been clear. David stood up and offered his hand. Long time no see, buddy. It's great to see you after all these years. You look 10 years younger. I smiled, shaking David's hand. It's good to see you too. I'm doing great. How's life? Oh, you know, same old, same old. Can't complain because no one listens anyway, David said with a grin. I smiled and kissed Sophie on the cheek. You look fantastic. I don't know what you saw in this guy, but I hope he treated you well. Sophie laughed. He may be rough around the edges, but I like that in a man. David asked, How do you know? I smiled. I'm a keen observer. I saw your reaction when I invited David here today. I think you two make a great team. David grinned. Speaking of which, what's the deal? I chuckled. Straight to business, David. You haven't changed a bit. Okay, let's discuss business. Then we can relax and enjoy the meal. As the waitress brought our drinks, I began. The company is in deep trouble. If we don't act soon, everyone will be looking for new jobs. As you know, options are limited. I pulled several folders from my briefcase and handed one to David. Feel free to critique or add anything. While David examined the folder, I opened another. Here's a list of people we need to get on our side. I'll leave it to you to figure out how. David flipped through the pages. You've really thought this through. Not only are we targeting JPL and Ella, but also Dobson Inc. and Brian. I saw David's thoughtful expression. We don't have much choice, David. Since Dobson acquired JPL, we need to strike from both sides. My initial focus was on JPL, but now we must also target Dobson's board. If you can win over the board and Sophie handles JPL, we have a shot, though it's a slim one. David handed the folder to Sophie. You're right. Mark's situation is beyond dire. It's critical, but I see potential. It wouldn't hurt to involve Peter Collins. He's a wizard with numbers. I nodded. Peter is brilliant, but we never got along. He never liked me. Sophie agreed while flipping through the folder. I concur. Peter should be included for his creative accounting skills. I'll speak to him first. David picked up the second folder and reviewed the list of names. I'm not sure I can reach some of these people, let alone convince them to join us. I smirked. What do you think I've been doing for the last 3 weeks? There's one named Martin that I couldn't get close to. If he's not on board, this plan won't work. How did you become so influential? David asked, clearly impressed. Influential? Hardly. If I were that good, Martin would be on our side. I handed David another folder. This is a list of meetings you have lined up with everyone except Martin. Sophie looked up from the folder. Isn't Martin Richard Hale's uncle? Maybe Richard can arrange a meeting with him. David and I exchanged glances and shrugged. David asked, Can you handle that, Sophie? Sophie smiled confidently. I have a meeting with Richard tomorrow to discuss trip plans. I'll bring it up then. This gave me a bit of relief. I've organized the times and dates for you. Things are chaotic even at the higher levels. I outlined my concerns, but didn't have a concrete plan yet. We need to get everything nailed down and everyone on board, I said, turning to Sophie. This operation has to be flawless. Sophie shook her head in disbelief. I can't believe Brian didn't anticipate this. Oh, he did, I replied with a sardonic laugh. He just doesn't care. He's got a scapegoat lined up. Ella's in for a rude awakening when he throws her under the bus. Sophie frowned in sympathy. Ella might be self-centered, but she doesn't deserve that. I nodded. Brian's going to make his move before the next quarterly meeting to cover himself. We need to act fast and make no mistakes. If we play our cards right, we'll succeed. David shook his head skeptically. You really think we're going to agree to this? I smiled. Think about it, David. What do you have to lose? Ella's pushing her agenda, so why not you? Have you found a job that really challenges you? I know you've got grievances with Ella, and Brian's no friend of yours either. Sophie believes in you, and so do I. This is your shot. I've set the scene. Now it's up to you to perform. David laughed, and Sophie joined in. All wrapped up with a pretty pink bow, he said sarcastically. Sophie's expression turned serious. What about Brian? He won't go down without a fight, and he's got enough clout to sabotage us before we even get started, she said, flipping through the second folder. I grinned. Leave Brian to me. You won't have to deal with him. Just keep Ella busy so she doesn't do anything drastic that could bring us all down. Sophie smirked. After your talk with her, she's the least of our worries. Isabelle's presence really shook her up. She's desperate to prove you wrong. You've gotten under her skin, Mark. I've had to adjust so many of her proposals just to make them remotely viable. David, Sophie, and I enjoyed our meal, discussing our strategies. As we parted ways, we planned to meet again in 2 days with others to finalize our plans. The next meeting was intense. Sophie and David had recruited a half-dozen allies to help. Peter Collins was among them, and as expected, he was hostile, but willing to listen. Let me see the financial packet, Peter demanded. We watched as he rapidly reviewed the numbers. This is absurd, Thompson. These numbers don't add up. I wanted to snap, but stayed calm. They're projections estimates. Peter sneered. Don't quit your day job, Thompson. These numbers are as dependable as a weatherman's forecast. Show me something real. I knew I had to handle this delicately. Listen, Peter. Can I call you Peter? We haven't spoken since Ella took over, but you're here because you're the best. He bristled but listened. I might seem like a grunt to you, but I'm not so inferior that I don't recognize condescension. I gritted my teeth. I know that sounded patronizing, but it doesn't make my words any less true. I addressed the room. What will you do when the next shareholders meeting comes around? I don't care if you agree with this plan or not. I can walk away and leave you to figure out your unemployment options. Peter, you're a numbers genius and can find another job easily. But what about everyone else? We need you to get creative and make these projections work. I saw the wheels turning in his head. So this isn't some scheme to elevate your ex-wife up the corporate ladder? I shook my head. No, Peter, she's my ex-wife. If we pull this off, she'll be lucky to shuffle papers in a dark, windowless room. I regret not burning that bridge when I divorced her. I'm here to fix that mistake. Whether this takeover succeeds or not, both she and Brian will be out. I guarantee it. Peter looked around the room and back at the folder. You know, Mark, I've been doing so much with so little for so long. Now I have the chance to do everything with nothing, he said, a wide grin spreading across his face. What's the deadline for this miracle? I glanced at David. We need it by 3 p.m. tomorrow, he said cautiously. Holy crap, Peter exclaimed, eyes wide. Even God would struggle to sort this out by then. We exchanged nervous glances and I began to doubt my plan. Then Peter surprised us. If I pull this off, I want a sign on my desk that says God, he joked. David grinned. I'll personally engrave it, and everyone will bow down if you deliver those numbers by 3 p.m. tomorrow. We all sighed in relief. Okay, folks, we're burning the midnight oil. Call whoever you need and get to work. Sophie asked if she could enlist some of the girls from the typing pool to help. It's your call, Sophie. Show us what you can do. I'm here to help with any questions, but it's up to you now, I said, handing her the reins. Oh my God, she exclaimed, glaring at David. Mark's right. Get it together and show everyone they can count on you in a crisis. David and I stepped back as Sophie took a deep breath and got to work. Within an hour, she was organizing teams and brainstorming ideas. Peter argued until she snapped. I don't care how many people you need, Peter. Just do it, okay? David chuckled. You were right, Mark. She's a hard worker. I smiled at David's pride. I never doubted it, I said, tapping my temple in agreement and moving to assist. I walked into Brian's office past his stunned secretary. I'm sorry, sir, but you can't go in there, she protested. Brian waved her off. It's fine, Grace. What's this about, Thompson? Why the surprise visit? That's no way to start a negotiation, Brian. I'd expect a man of your business savvy to show a little humility, I said with a cold smile. Brian sat back, scrutinizing me. I knew in a battle of wills, the first to speak loses. Brian, sweating, finally broke the silence. Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to tell me why you're here? I have a shareholders' meeting in an hour. I'm here to help you pack, I said bluntly. And where am I supposed to go? Brian's tone was incredulous. I don't care where you go, as long as you're out of here by the end of the day, I replied with a grin. I'd suggest moving to another state, maybe even the other side of the country. What if I refuse to leave? I'm not about to give up my cushy retirement package for someone like you, Brian sneered, leaning back in his chair with false confidence. I shook my head slowly. You've got two choices. Resign now and leave with some dignity, or stay and watch me tear your life apart piece by piece. By the time I'm done, you won't even be able to afford a cup of coffee. Brian's face tightened. I did what you wanted. I made Ella vice president, and she now runs JPL. Why the threats? We've never met, but I thought you kept your word. What changed your mind? Is this about her? I leaned in, our faces inches apart, and placed both hands firmly on his desk. You changed my mind. I was holding up my end of the deal until you broke it. Now you pay. You set Ella up to fail by letting her present a doomed proposal to the board. You saw a chance to use her to get to me, knowing she'd turn to me for help and I wouldn't. You broke our agreement, and now I'm here to collect. Sweat began to bead on Brian's forehead as he realized the seriousness of the situation. I didn't break our deal, Thompson. She came to me. I only gave her a chance to prove herself. If she's in trouble, it's her own fault. Don't give me that crap, I snarled, sweeping everything off his desk in a rage. You could have stopped her. Even a child could see she had no chance without your support. It was your choice, and you made the wrong one. Now fix it. Resign or watch your life crumble. Brian's face contorted with a mix of anger and fear. I doubt you have enough on me to follow through on your threats, he said, trying to sound defiant. I smiled coldly, watching him squirm. Do you think I've been idle? I have dirt on your affairs. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, and more. Your choice, jail or retirement. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. David Lawson is presenting a plan to your board right now that will destroy you. When I leave here, I'm handing over everything I have. That broke Brian. He reached for the intercom. Grace, come in with a pad and pencil. I need to dictate a letter. I walked over to his wine cabinet and poured myself a scotch. No rush, Brian. Take your time. I'll be gone by the end of the day. As I sipped my drink, his secretary entered, sensing the tension. No problem, Brian. I'll make sure to send your email, Gracette said, trying not to laugh as she left the office. Her reaction told me Brian wouldn't have time to gather his things before leaving. As he exited his office for the last time, I called out, I hear the weather's nice at the South Pole this time of year. I won't be looking for you there. Have a nice day, Brian. Gracette returned a few minutes later and hugged me. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you so much. I pulled back, puzzled. Why are you thanking me? Tears welled up in her eyes. Brian tried to blackmail me. He's been making advances, just hints so far, but I think he planned to push harder if I didn't comply. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done. I was furious that Brian had stooped so low. Well, he's out of your life now. You just focus on doing your job well. Gracette kissed me on the cheek. You're on my Christmas list now, and I'll talk my husband into naming our next child after you. She grinned. Thanks again for everything. She handed me the envelope. Typing this letter was the most fun I've ever had. 6 months later, I walked into the same office Brian had vacated. Good morning, Grace. Is the boss in? Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Yes, Mr. Lawson is expecting you. As I reached for the door, she added, Mr. Thompson, you were right. He's everything a secretary could want in a boss. Thanks again. I grinned as I opened the door. My pleasure, Grace, and call me Mark. Mr. Thompson was my father. Gracette chuckled and waved. How does it feel to be CEO of one of the most profitable companies in the stock market? I asked, sinking into a chair. Mark, you old rascal, where have you been? How are you? I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done for everyone, especially Sophie and me. She still pinches herself every morning to make sure it's not a dream. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? How do you know that? Are you waking up next to her? Is a mini-merger in the works? I joked. David shrugged. We're in the negotiation stage, but a deal is likely soon. Sophie would love to have you at the signing, and I hear you have a little filly you're nurturing too. I laughed. Exactly. You had a business to save. I had one to build. Isabelle is a fine thoroughbred. If I get the chance, I'll hitch my wagon to her. As our banter subsided, David asked more seriously, Have you heard about Ella? I grew solemn. Yes, Sophie called when she was taken to the hospital. The stress was too much and she snapped. Sophie asked if I would visit her, but I thought it would only make things worse until she gets professional help. David nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. Sophie feels a bit sorry for her. She might offer Ella an entry-level position at JPL, maybe as a secretary. I hope that doesn't offend you. I shook my head. No, I don't hate her. I don't even like her anymore. She's just someone I once knew. I hope she gets better and moves on. David leaned back. So, no desire to come back. I could find you a good job with a great financial package. I grinned. Not a chance. Besides, you don't need me. From what I hear, you've got God working for you now. David burst into laughter. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about Peter. He got his plaque and earned everyone's respect. You were right, he's a math genius. For a while, he was a hotshot. I'd walk into board meetings an hour before the shareholders' meeting, with his financial report in hand. David giggled. What's so funny? I asked. I was just thinking about how Peter looked when the girls would sneak up on him. We'll see how socially awkward he is when he tries to figure out women with math formulas. If he succeeds, I'll believe he's a god. I laughed. I would have loved to see that and attend the board meeting, but I had other business. While you were grooming board members, poor Brian was sweating at the table you now occupy. David smiled. If you ever need a job, let me know. I shook my head. I have what I want now. Isabelle and I have opened our family resort. I'm here to offer you corporate rates for Thanksgiving weekend. You could have contests and promote team building. David nodded. I think we can agree. Maybe a fishing contest or two will foster camaraderie. Isabelle and I were invited to David and Sophie's wedding, and now they have two wonderful boys. They are still a formidable team in the business world. At Christmas, we get cards from Grace and her family. She even talked her husband into naming their next child after me. Her name is Markantha, short for Mark. Brian hasn't been heard from since his wife dumped his clothes on the lawn and turned on the sprinklers. His Elvis autographed guitar became a necklace for his favorite garden gnome after Sarah dropped it on his head. I assume he's hunting penguins in Antarctica to keep warm, but that's just a rumor. As for Ella, after getting the help she needed to recover from what Brian did to her, she accepted Sophie's offer for an entry-level secretary job. She sold her luxurious mansion and bought a modest apartment within walking distance of work. She'll never be part of the elite business environment again, but she has her own home and will work until retirement. I talked to her at the corporate Thanksgiving party at the lake. She was hesitant to come until Sophie convinced her to unwind. We chatted, and she apologized for her arrogance, admitting she was out of line. I also apologized for jeopardizing her safety, but it was necessary to save everyone else's jobs. After therapy, she realized how flawed her thinking had been. She even laughed when I told her about Brian's downfall. She had a relaxing weekend, mostly sunbathing with coworkers. I don't know much about her social life, but Sophie mentioned she occasionally dates but rarely stays in a relationship for long. Honestly, I don't have time to think about it. It's her life, and she has to live with it. 6 months later, Isabelle and I got married and moved her and Lily into my cottage. I watched as she took out a picture of her late husband Henry from her suitcase, kissed it, and placed it in a drawer. Touched, I walked over, pulled out a picture of Vivian, and placed it on her dressing table. Henry deserves to see his wife happy, well-groomed, and loved, don't you think? Isabelle smiled tearfully and hugged me. You're a good man, Mark. I think Henry and you would have been great friends. My guardian angel has been looking out for me, and now I have two soulmates. I felt splendid, better than I had in years. When Lily is old enough, you'll have to tell her all about her father. They both deserve that. Our fishing resort is growing steadily. Rachel now has an apartment attached to the store, so we always know where to find her. We've added more cabins with docks for weekend fishing enthusiasts. I spend most days in my workshop, doing boat repairs and general maintenance. Isabelle runs the store, and Lily, now 5, is always underfoot. I've become a father figure to her, the only one she's ever known. Last summer, we surprised her with a little brother, Ethan, who has temporarily relieved her of some of our attention. I fuss over both of them, and even my doctor is pleased. Maybe I should send Ella a thank you card. Just kidding.